everybody. Welcome to this episode of Project Love. Today's guest is Brad White, who is a life coach and the author of A Family Connection. Hi, Brad. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about Brad, the life coach.
Where do I start? When I was born? No. I think probably most relevant to the conversation that we're going to have is probably the fact that when I, first started my career, I was a workaholic. That's my kind of like my backstory, if you will. I mean, I've got a wife here for 25 years. I've got 3 kids, twin daughters that are 18 that are about to head off to college. I've got a 16-year-old boy. But in terms of my life, I've been a career corporate executive, and like I said, recovering workaholic, trying to get balance back into my life so that I can have better relationships with my family and my friends.
Cool. So what inspired you to create the Family Connection?
It's an interesting story. So you're talking about like the relationship journal. What probably inspired me to do it was I was going through this period in my career again where I was working 70 hours a week, not spending hardly any time with my wife and kids. It was very, very career focused, right? I was just all about climbing the corporate ladder, making money, trying to provide for my family, and all the things that at least as a man, that's important, right? And I had young kids. I had twin daughters at that time where I think were 4 or 5 years old, and a son that was a toddler. And I really had sort of an awakening. I had an experience that really kind of helped me see that if I kept doing what I'm doing, my kids are going to grow up without a dad. My wife's going to grow up without a husband. I see, and I'm sure you see it too, just a lot of broken families, a lot of divorces, a lot of dysfunction in relationships and families. And I looked at that situation and I said, if I keep doing this the way I'm doing it now, 10 years from now, I'm going to be divorced. I'm not going to have any connection with my kids. And I really saw through the experience of other people too, that, daughters that grow up without a dad, sons that grow up without a dad, it's devastating. I mean, there's just so many negative consequences. And ultimately, I decided I need to do something to create more intentionality and purpose in my relationships, but also, and I think this is a key point, and most importantly, in line with my values, right? It wasn't just all about work, but that was what I was doing. Okay. That was what was comfortable. That was what was easy. And so I decided to create a journal that I could use and experience with my kids primarily, but also with my wife, but with my kids primarily, so that I was dedicating time to work with them, to be with them, to engage with them, to participate in life with them, as opposed to just like the family get together around the dinner table, which is hey, how was your day? I wasn't there, right? I was at work. My parents dinner and going to bed, and I was coming home. And so long story short, that was what inspired me to create the journal, because I just wanted to do something, right? I wanted to do something that was intentional and purposeful to connect with my kids.
Wow. That's a very heartfelt story. I mean, you really got it. So,
I did.
How has the Family Connection Journal helped you and others that you've given it to or that have used it?
Yeah, and let me tell you a little bit about that, and also I'll kind of another question you didn't ask. What is this journal, right? Like, what is this thing?
Yeah, explain to us, what is the journal?
Yeah,
I've seen it personally, so yes.
Yeah, so the relationship journal is, in fact, I'll just show you. So this is an example of what it is. And basically, it's a journal that has places where you can interact with your kids and your spouse, right? It has a section where you can ask questions, you can write in answers, and like for example, I know a lot of I did a lot of looking online to see what was out there, and I really didn't find anything kind of like what I was trying to create, which was, you use a lot of journals on the market, right? It has a very prescriptive approach. It has all these canned questions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I looked at those, and a lot of the questions were like, "Oh, I'm not really that interested in knowing that about, my kid, my son, or my daughter, or my wife, And so I wanted it to be a little bit more free form. As they grew up over time, right? Their interests and what they were interested in about me too was different, and so it's very free form, right? Places where I can ask questions, they can ask questions of me. Places where we can draw together, places where we can play together, places where we can, really talk about our relationship and what are our goals, right? Especially important with spouses, but I think it's also important with kids, right? It's like, how do you want our relationship to be? It's not just about me as a parent. What do you want our relationship to be? So, in a nutshell, what the journal is a guide for you to basically be able to have that interactive time with your kids, with your spouse. And so it is. And just since you haven't necessarily experienced it, basically the concept is you get together with your son or daughter, for example, your spouse. I do that over breakfast. That's what I do with my kids. I go to breakfast once a week with each one of them, and we just sit down, and I'll write a question because I'm curious about something that's going on in their life, and I'll give it to them, right? And then they'll answer it in the journal, and then we'll actually talk about it, right?
Wow.
And then it's their turn, right? Then I give them the journal, and it's their turn to write me a question. I'll answer it in the journal, and then we'll talk about it. And it's been mind blowing. It's been fascinating, the types of questions, especially over time. I've been doing this journal with my kids for over 10 years now,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, and it's really just precious time that I get to spend with them. And it's funny is I think the first question one of my daughters asked was like, "What's your favorite ice cream?" Right? Okay,
Oh, wow.
it was, "Do you like horses?" Right? But then those questions evolved over time to where we're now getting into deeper conversations like, "What do you think about God?" You know, um, what you know, what is your spiritual life like? What do you want now that they're 18? Like, what do you want in a mate? Like what
Oh,
do you like
wow.
when what are you looking for when you look for a boyfriend or girlfriend, things like that. Um, so it's been really, really cool. But to answer your question about like, what's the impact been? The impact has been amazing. Okay. Um, I get this dedicated time with my kids, and I'll share about some other stories too, but just I get dedicated time with my kids where, which is especially important when you have twins like I did.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they don't want to be treated as twins, right? They're individuals, right? They want their own time. And so just being able to spend one-on-one time with them has been amazing, right? They really, really like that. They appreciate that. And they honor that time. The But it's allowed us to have, I don't know probably what the best way to phrase this is a non-threatening conversation, right? So, for everybody that's watching that has kids, there's some kids they don't want to talk about certain things, right? Whether it's a privacy thing or they're maybe just not feeling so insecure about certain topics, right? And so um, created an engagement with them that has opened up the possibility of having really deeper conversations, right? So the relationship that I have is more meaningful. It's richer. Um, they're a lot more able to come and approach me. When we're not using the journal and spending time together, they can come to me other times, and I think they're more open to having a conversation because we've had those very interactive type of conversations. So it's been cool. But I think the other benefit, like some of the folks that I've shared this with, and they've used it in their own families, it's fun. I mean, we can't forget about the fact that sometimes, especially in parent-child relationships, it can all be about, chores and doing responsibilities and be obedient and things like that. But this is just fun time, right? So part of it is just having that fun time together,
Mm-hmm.
and and one of my clients that uses this with their kids, I think it's cool. Like he was talking to me just the other day, and he's like, my I thought it was going to be this thing where it's going to come across as like I'm forcing you to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But his daughter was like coming up to him and saying, "Hey, are we going to ask questions today? We're
Wow.
going to spend some time in this today." And so I think what's cool about it is the kids can take ownership of the relationship on their side of
Mm-hmm.
it, or their half of it, if you will, and they want to do it. They want to spend time with us, right? And and probably the last thing, and then if you have any other questions on that, when it comes to like with using this type of relationship journal with the spouse, has been really incredible because I don't know if you're like, Lisa, you specifically, or the people who are watching, but I think husbands and wives, we get into a rut, right? We get into this pattern where
Absolutely.
we're just going through the motions, and we've learned everything there is possibly to learn about the other person, right? Which is not true, right? Every
Mm-mm.
day we have thoughts, we have passions, we have regrets, we have all these things, and a lot of times they're below the surface, not getting talked about, and so I think that's another amazing part of this that can be shared on a spousal level is really just kind of like getting beyond the how was your day, what do we do, who's picking up the kids, all that stuff, and really go a little bit deeper. So that's been cool.
Kind of opens up the level of communication.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
For sure.
Okay. Um, any additional comments or advice to parents to stay connected to other family members or friends? From your experience that you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. The key message that I want to keep pounding home is just this concept of intentionality and doing things on purpose. Okay. Um, in fact, again, I see this with my coaching clients. A lot of times the problems happen when you're just going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
You're not paid attention to stuff. You're not paying attention to your spouse. You're not paying attention to your kids. You're not listening to them, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
just going through your daily routine. And so I think that's the first thing is really just whether it's a family or a friendship, that you want to have a better relationship with, you have to be on purpose. You have to really be on purpose and do things intentionally. I mean, how many times? I mean, I'll even ask you this, Lisa, this back. It's like, how many times have you met with a girlfriend or friend, and it's like, hey, let's do lunch. Let's get together and let's have lunch. Right?
Many times. And
Okay.
how many times have we fell through the cracks?
Yep.
Many times.
Yep.
Mhm.
And that's because somebody, and hopefully it's both, but somebody has to take ownership. Somebody has to take
Absolutely.
not just responsibility, but just somebody has to be the person who goes first and says, I'm going to, on purpose, with intention, I'm going to make this happen, right? I'm going to get on my
Absolutely.
calendar. I'm going to get it scheduled. I'm going to send you the email. I'm going to make an appointment, whatever. Okay. And so I think the same thing is true in families, right? It's so easy to let the day get away from us, the week, the month, the year, the decade get away from us, where we're just letting life happen. And so I think a key is really dedicating time for that relationship. Okay, so for example, okay, my kids, um, I've got it on the calendar every single Sunday in the morning. One of my kids and I are having breakfast. Okay, and that's so I've got three, so that makes it easy, right? There's 3 weeks, and then the fourth week I have breakfast with my wife. So for me, having breakfast is what I like to do. Okay, my
Mhm.
wife, she's different, right? She doesn't want to get up that early. She doesn't want to do the breakfast. For her, it's going to have dinner, okay, or it's going to have lunch with a girlfriend.
Mhm.
Maybe it's going to the mall and just shopping and trying to interact during that type of time. Um, but I think that again, just kind of like the drill that's home, the key is you got to make it on purpose. You got to do it intentional, um, and make sure that you're living within your values, right? So for me, it's about relationships. I mean, I know a lot of people who make have careers. They're very career focused. They're making a lot of very good money, and their relationships are crumbling. You
Mhm.
their health is suffering. Well, at the end of the day, it's like, what's important? What's important to you? Um,
Mhm.
from my experience, if your health is suffering, nothing else matters, right? Everything's bad, right? You're sick in bed or you're dealing with chronic pain. It's just bad. right? Well, if your relationships are suffering, what else matters? I mean, it's kind of like if things are going breaking at home with your spouse or with your kids, you can go escape to work, but when you come home, it's still there, right?
Yep, it
And
is.
so, making that, if relationships are important to you, then really spending time and making an effort to work on it. This is something that I really kind of separate from the journal itself, but specifically like my wife, that I really appreciate is my wife has always been about the dating thing. I
Mhm.
mean, we've been married for 25 years. Uh, Generally speaking, with only just a few exceptions, we've basically had a date night every single week for
Oh,
25 years. I owe complete credit to that to my wife, because she has been purposeful, right? That's important to her. It's important to us, but it's important to her. And so she makes it happen. She gets it on the calendar. She makes it work. And so I think that concept,
mm-hmm.
making it on purpose, can just that one concept alone can make all the difference, because if you're carving out time out of your day to spend with your spouse, to spend with your kids, more often than not, you're going to have an opportunity to improve that relationship, right? So that's probably the biggest one. Um, yeah, just
Wow.
making purposeful time.
You've given everyone that's watching a lot to think about. Well, if someone wanted to use your services or get your journal, how would they go about that?
Great question. So there's really two ways. You can go to my website, okay, which is lifeexec.coach, lifeexec.coach. And you could scroll down to the bottom of that, and I've got a link for the journal. But you can also find it on Amazon, which is kind of cool. If you go to Amazon and you do a search for Interactive Relationship Journal, Brad White,
Mm-hmm.
Interactive Relationship Journal, Brad White, you'll find it there. It kind of looks like this. There's a whole, Amazon. You got 1,000 journals. This is the one that
Right.
I created. So that's the one you're looking for.
Well, thank you for all the information, and thank you for being on our show today. We appreciate it, and
Well, you're welcome,
hopefully,
and thank you
hopefully,
for inviting me.
you're welcome. You're welcome, and hopefully, someone will take your advice and get the journal, because what you're doing and what you're promoting is very important in relationships and in life. So, thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
You're welcome. And everyone, thank you for joining us for this episode of Project Love. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.